gentlemen, here it is.
These are wonderful boys.
God, I love the station.
Right now, I want to get my guest on the air here, Frank Joseph Hoff and Philipe Santos. Let's start with Frank. From a very young age, Frank Joseph Hoff became very interested in the sciences, ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, and the unknown. In 1996, Mr. Hoff met up with Richard Hoagland at a Mars conference in Seattle and started doing some pro bono research for him in his off hours. It is while doing the research for Mr. Hoagland that he came across the unusual work of Brazilian professor by the name of Professor Santos, and on his Atlantis website, which is www.atlan, that's atlan.org. Atlantis, the Lost Continent Finally Found, is the book. And also joining us tonight is Philipe Santos. I think it's Araujo. I can't get this last name. I'm going to need help with. But here we go. He's an information scientist and physicist working with academic research, editing of articles and videos, software development, and solar energy sales, specialist in international intellectual property research with broad experience in computer sciences and modern trends, vice president of Atlantis Publications. And so, without wasting another second, why don't I go ahead and start out by bringing Frank Joseph Hoff on, and then we'll go from there. So here we go. Yes, sir, we are live. I welcome you to The Last Frequency. How you been?
Hey, I'm doing just fine. So good evening to you and all your listeners out there, wherever they may be.
Oh, awesome. So now I know at some point we're going to be bringing another guest on here with us. Is it Philipe?
Yes, Philipe.
Yeah.
Santos Araujo.
Okay.
Just wanted to let everybody know that our work is based on the seminal research of the late Professor Arysio Nunes dos Santos, Ph.D., out of Brazil. He worked for the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. He was a professor nuclear engineering, nuclear physics. He studied the disciplines of archaeology, mythology, linguistics, ethnology, occultism. Not that he wanted to be occultism, but he had to understand the different hidden meanings and things and symbols of words, and so to get a good idea about Atlantis, and also alchemy and etymology, or the derivation and origination of words. He actually spoke 14 languages, by the way. So it'd take a person like him actually be able to uncover the riddle of Atlantis after basically 11,600 years.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. And so Atlantis, it's something that, God, we've been talking about this for a while. You guys believe that you actually know exactly where it is, right?
This is for you and your listeners. This is not just like any, show on Atlantis.
Yeah.
What we're involved in is the actual discovery, the physical discovery of the lost city and continent Atlantis, probably for the first time in history. And to bring that out to the public, because what this was is Professor Santos' gift to the entire world. And that's what he told me several times before he passed away, unfortunately, in September of 2005. So it was a great loss to the world, because they don't make these people like Professor Santos that went so much in depth about Atlantis. He originally went out to disprove the whole notion of Atlantis and ended up turning around 180 degrees after over 10 years of research, and found out it actually really did exist, and there was a lot more advanced civilization than he imagined. So anyhow, it's the actual physical discovery of the lost continent after all these years. It's really time to get the the word out, the truth out about Atlantis. And I also was going to preface the show that we're not here to do this in any way that's we don't have any particular political agenda, religious agenda, social agenda, ethnic agenda, even an economic agenda. Most of this has just been done at really a loss to us as far as monetarily.
Yeah.
So, we're just trying to get it out after all this time, because Professor Santos, in a sense, was the ancients or initiates, their representative or messenger. And so, because he was able to decode pretty much most of the riddle of Atlantis after maybe more than 10 years, but because he actually turned around 180 degrees after 10 years of actually trying to debunk it. And actually I did 30 years of research on this in order to really come through with the actual find. And he got into what he told me many traps in the past, so like many researchers on Atlantis have. But the problem has been is that of Atlantis is, a lot of researchers have done this that didn't have the necessarily disciplines that I just mentioned earlier here, that he had in order to decipher this whole riddle of Atlantis. And so he got lucky, but also he had the necessary disciplines to do the work properly. And so that's what we're going to lay out. He was a nuclear physicist, a nuclear engineer. He was a physical chemist. He was into archaeology, anthropology, mythology, linguistics, ethnology, occultism. As I mentioned before, not to be an occultist per se, but to really to find out what the hidden meanings and symbols are behind things, and also the etymology of the derivation and origins of words. So it took a lot of different work. As I mentioned earlier, he did 14. He could speak 14 languages. And by the way, a couple of things with that. Our website is at www.atlan.org, which is the first 5 letters of Atlantis. Again, www.atlan.org. And just to let everybody know, I'm the president of Atlantis Publications, but also I was Professor Santos' understudy, researcher, and business agent until his untimely death in September of 2005. I wanted to also mention, too, for your listeners that might be in foreign countries or speak foreign languages, that we have a new website up. We've reconstituted the whole website and added a whole lot of things to it now, and we're still updating it. It's still basically under construction. But the website will translate into over 100 languages. I think it's 104. Now, we have some scientific articles that are up there right now that are called the basically free articles. And those particular ones a couple of them will translate automatically into the foreign languages, but some other ones will not do it yet, but we're in the process of having them all translate, but the rest of the website will translate into all these different languages from around the world, Michael.
That's incredible. That's boy, it sounds like that might be costly too. So and that's one of the things about doing this kind of work. It's basically about your heart is in it. You wanna get to the bottom of all that is Atlantis, and so you sacrifice your own self and resources to do it. And I appreciate that. And boy, that's great. All them languages. So everybody get a piece of it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's what this really is about humanity, and which brings me something I should probably let everybody know. What is the importance of Atlantis for mankind? And the answer to that is Atlantis is the source of most all religions, most all sciences, and all races and civilizations. It is the cradle or birthplace of world civilization, where civilization began. It's now at the very dawn of the millennium, has been predicted from deepest antiquities, and is indeed the true message of the Gospels and other such holy books. The discovery of Atlantis brings back the hope of rebirth of the Golden Age, with the promise of universal peace, harmony, love, and happiness for all mankind. It will also cause a major revolution in our view of the world and of both our past and our future, for it is a remembrance of our ancient ancestors from our ancient motherland and fatherland and honoring them. All this has happened now as we enter the third millennium, the age of Aquarius.
And with Atlantis, some people still say, "Oh, it's a myth," but I mean, honestly, this is a place that really exists, and I'm looking forward to at some point tonight getting into the technology that might have existed there, and a lot of that good stuff. But it's no myth.
No, it's no myth. Actually, the word myth has changed over time. It used to be at one time considered mostly true. Okay, that's what the usual meaning is. Now it kind of means mostly false. It's actually changed meaning over time. And we're talking at least 11,600 years going back into history as the ending date, just the ending date of Atlantis, let alone go back, 20,000, 50,000, 70,000 years or so or more. Actually go back millions of years. But, that's just the ending date. And what happened is through time, actually everybody's been looking for Atlantis in the wrong place, in the wrong haystack or haystacks. And so if you look in the wrong haystack or haystacks, you'll never find it. It's hard enough to find a needle in a haystack, let alone if you look in the wrong ones to begin with. And so that's why Professor Santos had to figure out where a civilization that could exist, to support a population of more than 20 million people in the middle of the Pleistocene Ice Age. And so he had to look for a spot on Earth where that would happen. And most of the spots everybody's been looking at have been over towards Europe and maybe in the Caribbean and places like that. But what I was able to figure out is that it was actually on a different side of the world, and because what happened is that Christopher Columbus was actually he is so called discovered America, but he was actually looking for the East Indies for the kings and queens of Europe. And what happened is these oceans got changed over time. The Atlantic Ocean, as it's called today, the Pacific Ocean, as it's called today, the Indian Ocean, as it's called today, and a lot of names get changed over, let's say, 1,000 years, let alone 11,600. And so this has caused all the confusion to everything and everybody, looking for Atlantis. But also they want to keep Atlantis secret, the location, because of it has many riches of gold and silver and different zinc and tin and copper and everything for strategic metals, and also the different types of gems and things like that, diamonds and rubies and sapphires and all these kind of things. And so a lot of the kings and queens and people that had some knowledge of this wanted to keep it secret. So if you started talking about it, you were in jeopardy about doing that because they wanted it for themselves. But also the area, they didn't want the area to be pillaged and plundered too and desecrated was another reason as time went along too. So that's kind of a bit of a layout on it, and we can get into why it's located where it is versus someplace else that you've all been hearing about over all these decades, hundreds and thousands of years.
Yeah, that's a good question, really, is why is it located there? And, I think a lot of people tried to say it was in the Atlantic just because Atlantic, and, so some people kind of figured that's probably why they were looking, where they were looking. Now, what made you and Professor Santos what made you guys look in a different direction?
Well, because we found out that the oceans of the Atlanteans was actually coterminous. That's like the scientific word. They all connect. If you go, you can actually sail from one part of the world, let's say from the Pacific Ocean over to the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean, whichever way, or east or west you wanted to go. It's just a matter of how you have to go around the tip of, let's say, Africa or the tip of South America. Or, there's a way of actually navigating and to whatever location you wanted. But the names got changed, and so especially the one, the Pacific Ocean. See, a person by the name of Vasco Balboa, he actually discovered supposedly the Pacific Ocean, but he didn't name it. But another explorer by the name of Ferdinand Magellan actually named it because he saw it through the Straits of Magellan, and he saw it as a very passive and calm ocean, so he named it for the infinitive verb in Portuguese or Spanish called pacificar. And depending on how you use it in the sentence, you can either call it pacifico or pacifica. And what we've done now is drop the A or the O and call it the Pacific Ocean. Again, it's also the same word they use in like a baby's pacifier. I mean, it's a passive in calm ocean. That's how he saw it when he first saw the Pacific Ocean. Now, other days it could have been in a much rougher ocean, but that's the way when he actually saw it for the first time. And he named it, and it stuck. And so that added to do a lot of the confusion. So if he wouldn't have named it that, they would have left it as the Atlantic Ocean or Oceans of the Atlanteans or the Atlantis Ocean, it would have been a lot easier. Or maybe if they would have changed the Atlantic Ocean as it is today to the English Ocean or something different, that might have helped. And then also the Indian Ocean used to be called the Erythraean Sea, and the Erythraean Sea got changed to the Indian Ocean. So these things got changed around over time. And so if it would have been much better had they changed the name of the Indian Ocean over to also the Atlantean Ocean, So it should have been the whole thing should have been the Atlantean Ocean for that matter. But if they had to change something, at least if they would have kept the Pacific Ocean and the let's say the Indian Ocean under the Atlantean name, that might have made it a lot simpler for people and led them to the right direction. But some people wanted to confuse the situation because they wanted to keep it secret too. So that's another thing that was going on, misinformation. Has
governments around the world, I mean, do they know where this place is located, and have they already rummaged through things? How is that? I know you were getting cooperation with foreign governments in your search and exploration of Atlantis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I've been invited in the past, and we have a lot of this up on our website too, and there's funner photos and whatnot, to Indonesia on behalf of the federal government of Indonesia and also the local area of West Java, Indonesia as well. And I spoke at the World Cultural Forum a few years back, and also at the Ancient Sundaland Conference a while back, because it's also, as Professor described, it's also known as Sundaland too, Sundaland. And so it's coming along. I mean, I'm hoping to have a big conference there, because we've had kind of a smaller one. There's been different conferences. I've been like 3 different ones already, and I'd like to have a fairly good size one where we can really start laying this out, not just by me, but other researchers that are in Indonesia and around the world that have come to grips with maybe where the actual location of Atlantis is, and we were able to figure out where it actually is located, and because it's the actual name Atlantis was encoded in 3 different languages, which is ancient Greek, Sanskrit, and Dravida. And Professor Santos was actually able to figure out the language of the Atlanteans, and that language is Dravida, it's Dravidian. And so when you actually know what the language is that they speak, it makes it a lot easier to start to fill in the pieces of a billion-piece puzzle that got scattered all around the world. You follow me?
Yes, sir.
Michael?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So what kind of artifacts, if any, have been, and I know in the past you've sent me lots of pictures, which I had at one time had up on the website. What kind of artifacts have been, discovered there? I mean, what kind of tale do they tell?
Well, right now, when I was there a number of years back, because I actually was there for my engagement party in Indonesia, and so what happened is we located the. This is before I ever got engaged or anything. Long before that, Professor Santos came to the location, being located in the area of Indonesia and area of Southeast Asia, and they've been covered after I was there for a couple of conferences. I mentioned about maybe looking around at some of these ancient sites and temples and mountains and so on, and they did. And they came up with one called Gunung Padang, which actually means the enlightened kingdom mountain place of our great ancestors. That's what Gunung Padang means. And it's actually a mountain in mass. It's actually bigger than the Great Pyramid in Egypt, which I've been to and inside of it, called Khufu. And that particular pyramid at Gunung Padang is actually artificial. It's not natural. They thought it might have been natural, but they found out it's artificial because they did geoelectric radar and ground penetrating radar, and they drilled core samples in it, and the core samples came back after, being over 11,000 years old, and they went deeper, and they went to like 13,000, 15,000, 18,000, 20,000, and they're somewhere maybe right around 23,000. And they had these analyzed at two different laboratories, one in Miami, Florida, which is one of the best in the world, and also one in Jakarta, Indonesia as well. And so it's fairly accurate on this dating of it, the carbon dating, because the carbon dating goes back, over 50,000 years is where the cutoff is, and this only has to go back, let's say, maybe 23,000 years or more. So that's one thing. Now, in addition to that, I found out that, and there's a picture up on our website of myself and a person by the name of Danny Hillman Natawijaya. He's a geologist there, and he's in yellow in that photo. It's up on our website. And he told me and showed me some charts that they actually found 3 caverns in there, or that are actually inside of the mountain, and there's something like maybe 10 meters by 10 meters and about 6 meters high. There's 2 of them that are connected together, and there's a third one off to the side. We're not even sure that one's connected or not right now. But he's mentioned also that they're kind of like airtight or maybe watertight. So whatever might be in them, like maybe something like the Hall of Records or something, is going to be well preserved versus something like the Dead Sea Scrolls, which got a lot of moisture into it, so I pieced it back together over a period of, 30 years or something like that, in fragments. So this would be much more preserved. It's also up high in the mountain, and so chances are there'll be a lot more, whatever's inside it in much better shape as far as with regards to perspiration or something like that, or condensation, or some type of water or liquid to get into it.
Yeah,
or air for that.
And the thinner the oxygen, the more preserved it'd probably be, right?
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit more preserved that way, and that's the hope. I think they took some precautions, whoever put together that ancient pyramid, and I just assume it's going to be the Atlanteans in this case, that it's well protected. And which brings me to mind, I mentioned the name Atlantis encoded in 3 languages, ancient Greek, Sanskrit, and Dravida. And maybe you can keep with me here. Are we ready for a commercial break anytime soon? Or?
I'm coming up on one in about 6 minutes.
Okay, I think I can lay this out in time.
Okay.
So I hope everybody can bear with me. I'll try to do this slow. It's a little bit complex.
Okay.
The name Atlantis comes from the name Atlas, and the middle letters derived from the Greek radix, T-L-A, mean to bear, but with a negative, or an A in front of that's negative in front of A-T-L-A, Atla, means not or unable to bear the weight of the skies. It's like when the skies came down. And this has to refer to actually the Krakatoa volcano. As Atlas is portrayed in these photos you may see of him with weak serpentine legs holding up on his upper back a globe of the world. You may have seen those figures at times in pictures, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next is the Greek name is derived from similar Sanskrit one of Atala rather than Atla, which is a Hindu hell, the site of the Hindu sunken paradise. The part of Atala in Sanskrit is Tala, means pillar or pillar of heaven. It can also mean earthland. So again, with the A in front of which it makes it negative, the word Atala means no land. Now, the last part of this is in Dravida, the language of the Atlanteans, this word is formed from Ata Allah. The first root, Ata, means foot soles, footsteps, antipodes, or antipodal. Now, antipodal means on the opposite side of the earth. The second root, Allah, means sunken land, lagoon, marshland, island. Furthermore, appending the suffix at the end of the word Atlantis, TIS, the word Atlantis is also spelled with a TIV and pronounced TIW in Dravida, because the V's are pronounced as W in Dravida, just as Java is pronounced as Jawa. So when you go to Indonesia, they don't say Java, they say Jawa, because the V's are pronounced as a W, but the same word is actually a Dravida name originally, and it means mountain island. So in short, Atlantis is located in the sunken mountain island marshland on the opposite side of the world, and that means in the east, which from Europe is at the farthest west across the Atlantic Ocean and across the Pacific Ocean, where it meets the Indian Ocean, to what is now called Indonesia and the surrounding area of Southeast Asia.
Oh, okay. And so
that took a lot of decoding and a lot of work to get that figured out. It wasn't easy. It takes a lot of time. Even today, even writing this thing out just to get it down so you can maybe understand it to some degree. But we're talking in 3 different languages, and one of them is actually ancient Greek, and of course the other one is Dravida, which not too many people know about. And by the way, Dravida is close to the language of Tamil, and actually our website will translate it into Tamil, by the way, or Tamil, or Tamil, or Tamir. You can see it 4 different ways.
Wow. Yeah, you guys are pretty sophisticated in the language department. Okay. All right. Well, all very interesting, Frank. What we're going to do here is we'll take a break. Then we'll come back and we'll bring Philipe on with us. So, Frank, hang on with me for a few minutes. Folks, interesting stuff. Atlantis, the lost continent, finally found. Frank's been at it for a while. It's good to have him back here. So we'll get back to it on the other side of this break. You're listening to The Last Frequency. I'm Mike Vera with Frank Joseph Hoff. My guest. We'll be right back. All right. Maybe after tonight you won't be able to get it completely out of your head either. We are talking about Atlantis, the lost continent finally found. My guest, he is Frank Joseph Hoff. And we're going to be talking to another gentleman here shortly, too, who's going to join Frank. And that is Philipe Santos Araujo. I think I'm getting that right, if I remember correctly. Probably not. But anyways, I'm going to bring Frank on back with us. All right, Frank, we are back. And so, yeah, whatever else you'd like to touch on before we bring Philipe in with us, by all means, let's go there, because I certainly have a lot of questions at some point about the technologies and things. I'm really hyped up about this tonight. It's been a while.
Well, I'm glad to answer some questions, and Philipe too, on this. Okay, so everybody thinks of the Pillars of Hercules as described in the dialogues of Plato as in the Critias and Timaeus dialogues. That is, that it's outside the Pillars of Hercules, which is, or Gibraltar, which is between Spain and Morocco. But he didn't say how far outside. He just said outside, okay? Not like inside where the Mediterranean Sea is or something like that.
Right.
So, but as I mentioned before, we found out, encoded in the word Atlantis, it means antipodal, which means on the opposite side of the world from, let's say, Europe, to the farthest west to the farthest east, okay, depending on what side of the world you're coming in from, or you're heading out from. And that's where east meets west. It's actually where the Pacific Ocean, as it's called today, meets the Indian Ocean, as it's called today, and it used to be, of course, the Erythraean Sea, as I mentioned earlier. And these names got changed, and it used to be called, the whole thing was called the Atlantis Ocean, or Ocean of the Atlanteans, because it's coterminous. You can navigate from one sea or ocean to the other, and all around the world. And the Atlanteans well knew about how to do this. But anyhow, what happened is that in order to get into the gateway or the location of the capital city of Atlantis, which was in concentric rings, in order to bring in all the trade, because they had large ships, because there used to be traders trade all around the world. It used to go down through what is now called the Lombok Strait, through the Wallace Line between the islands of Bali and Lombok, and that came into the capital city of Atlantis. That was the original Pillars of Hercules between the mountains that are on Bali, which is Mount Agun, and the mountain that is located on Lombok, which is called Mount Rijani. By the way, when I flew over there to one of the conferences, which is the World Cultural Forum, I actually saw Mount Rijani from the air, and it has kind of a huge kind of shape at the top of it, so it's kind of like a little bit of a hook in there. But at any rate, that used to be the original Pillars of Hercules until the Krakatoa or Krakatoa volcano went off. And when it went off, then it opened up the Sunda Strait, which is now between what is called Sumatra and Jawa islands. And it actually used to be called Upper Java and Lower Java at one time. But in any case, it's now the upper part is now called Sumatra. And the word Krakatoa or Krakatau, depending on which language, and also Krakata and Krakaka, depending on whether it's in Sanskrit or Dravida, means to saw in half. It means to saw the island of Java in half. And that's what the name Krakatoa means. So what we found out is not only that you can trigger off an ice age with a volcanic action, but also and seismic action, but also can be triggered on too, because it can also send up a whole lot of fly ash that can actually maybe darken the earth, the light coming in, and cause it to go into an ice age too. So anyhow, it can do both, and so this is what we have when we have in some of these Bibles and Gospels and whatnot about it rained for 40 days and 40 nights and all this kind of thing all ties into it. So it goes back in time to these the ending of the Pleistocene Ice Age with the Krakatoa volcano, with the Toba volcano, and so on. So that's kind of, I hope that lays it out to some degree. Maybe you have more questions for me because of that.
Absolutely. Now, I get somebody sent a question in here on the portal and asked if there was other civilizations also besides Atlantis at that time.
Well, what happened is after this happened is that I was going to mention too is that after everything receded as far as in the waters going up over people's heads before they got burnt by the volcano, by the fly ash and the rocks and everything coming down. They ended up fleeing into other areas, and they fled into a lot of what is India in the Indus Valley River, in this Delta Valley River area between Pakistan and India, which is more India at the time, and the border has changed. And also, because they are a seafaring people, they also are able to go into other areas and navigate down to Peru and Ecuador, which, by the way, there's probably more lost civilizations and ruins down there that are covered or uncovered than almost any place in the world. But they had to go to a place because the Pleistocene Ice Age was still ending, and it took a period of time to do this because it didn't end like exactly right away, but there's a lot of seismic activity and earthquakes and underwater volcanoes and everything else going off throughout the world, so how it balanced out over time. Also because when you take a whole lot of load off the continents of ice and water, then that's got to go someplace, and then when you alleviate that ice and water off the continent, it also goes in the bottom of the sea, so it all takes and more weight onto the bottom of the ocean to cause more cracking, more seismic activity, more volcanic activity. Everything has straightened out over a period, let's say maybe 1,000 years. It's balanced out over time. At the same time, sea levels rose. Okay, and they rose not only just in that area, which is only 130 to 150 meters based on the universal flood. But it covered that area, and so that whole continent is down there, the size of the entire continental United States with Alaska and Hawaii combined. Now, it's not just there because we have bathymetric readings and everything and data for doing it, but also we have a NOAA Space Spy satellite infrared showing that it's absolutely down there. If we just drop the sea level down 130 to 150 meters, the whole continent appears again of the entire United States in size, the continental United States with Alaska and Hawaii combined. That size of area, it's huge.
Ooh.
So, in answer to the rest of that question for the person to ask it, is that these civilizations spread out to the entire world from there. And so when you see these pyramids and mountains and some of these constructions, that's because they were trying to take some of their homeland and construct what they had of their holy mountain of paradise, Mount Meru, which is actually from Mount Krakatoa is Mount Kumaru, and also which is the holy mountain of paradise, but also Mount Sumeru, which is the Toba volcano when it went off a long time ago. So the motherland, which is Lemuria, was the original motherland in the area of Indonesia, and what they had to do is flee out to mainly India until they kind of recover, especially when the Toba volcano went off, and so that's called the fatherland, and it had to rebuild over a period of over 63,000 years to what was now the Atlantis proper, the advanced civilization until the Krakatoa volcano went off 11,600 years ago. So all this the civilization spread out to the natives in other parts of the world that were in an area which is fairly temperate climate, but most of those temperate climates tended to be around where the equator is. And so we can get more into that, and that goes right over Sumatra, which is Sumatra today, by the way. Is Philipe online with you yet, by the way?
Hello, Philipe.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. It's nice to have you here. Frank Joseph Hoff is with us. I appreciate you taking time to be with us tonight.
Michael, Felipe is in Brazil.
Oh, okay. All right. And how are things in Brazil tonight, Felipe?
Pretty great.
Good.
I got it. Sorry, I had two sounds going on. So yes, have a good evening, everybody. I'm Philip. I'm here from Brazil. Great night here. Pretty clear.
Nice.
It's really great being here with you. I'm Arysio's grandson. This whole research, he devoted 30 years plus.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking out time. It's good to meet you. I never met your grandfather, but I've heard a lot of great things about him through Frank and some of the others who have been on the show in the past. So thank you.
Sure. Of course. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, Frank, maybe give us a little insight on what Felipe will bring to the table tonight, and how he's involved with how you guys are involved, obviously through his grandfather, but the work that you guys do together.
Well, Felipe has been actually very instrumental in helping with the new website and getting things up and going on that, including some of the photos and whatnot. We actually had a couple of guys from Brazil, actually webmasters there, work with us, and along with Felipe and so on. And so we designed the website. One of the things that come up on the website, by the way, is that this might be really surprising to people, but usually, Japan as a land of the rising sun. You've heard that. It's on the flag with the sun and on a white background. Is that you remember that? Or know how that goes, Michael?
Yes, sir. Yes, I do.
Well, it wasn't the original land of the rising sun. It actually was Indonesia, Atlantis at the time. Because what happened is that's where the days started by convention. And also, it was the sun basically rising up from the ocean is the way it looked. And it was also the land of the setting sun as it set behind the mountains, like the holy mountain of paradise in Indonesia, Mount Krakatoa, or Mount Kumaru. So that's got adopted by the Japanese on their flag, and the international date line is all over there too, and also the equator goes, which is a temperate climate, goes right through Sumatra.
All right. And so, is it Felipe or Philip?
I guess Phil is fine.
Okay. All right. Well, Phil, can you talk a little bit maybe about your growing up and your grandfather's work and how it affected you, and maybe get into a little bit of that and your whole thoughts on Atlantis and where it's located? And
of course, yes. Growing up, I had the figure of my grandfather, right, which is this very interesting person, nuclear physicist, Ph.D. Devotes his life. He's self-made. He had many patents and inventions in his lifetime, right? And we're talking about a genius human being. So it's pretty amazing. And I had the opportunity of living close by with all this. Yes, so I would remember he was a very different subject, very nice guy. Sadly, he passed away right after publishing his book, his second book, actually. But he wrote around 30,000 pages of research, Michael.
Ooh.
And we're talking about like hundreds or thousands of articles on many different subjects. We're talking about this level of devoted scientist. That's what he was, a researcher, science researcher. And he devoted his life, 30 years of his life at least, on studying the occult, ancient myths, mysteries, religions, languages, and civilizations, ancients, from over the world. He spoke 14 languages, I believe Frank mentioned this. Yeah. And he would read a book a day at least on his downtime. Wow. I personally went to his library many times, and I always saw him working. Just like crazy devotion about a topic. So,
wow, 14 languages. Yeah, I mean, I have trouble with one. I couldn't imagine knowing 14 languages. I mean, you've got to be a genius to be able to do that, I think. So, amazing. And so then, Frank, obviously, you come across Professor Santos' work, and I think the rest is history. You've been at it since, have you not?
Yeah, I came across his work a while back. Actually, I was doing some pro bono research for Richard Hoagland at one time, who was a former science advisor to Walter Cronkite, and he's famous with the Face on Mars project going on, and maybe the Moon too. And so I came across Professor Santos' website, and although I was interested in Atlantis for a long time as a kid, I'd never seen any work in detail and the depth that Professor Santos had going on his website, because I came across it just after he had put it up. And it was very different than anybody else's website on Atlantis. It's so much more detail and more logical and instructive about it, because in order to solve the problem of Atlantis, it requires both supports, that of the occult tradition and also of official science. And so that's what he was doing, and he wasn't leaving things out, like in order to fill in all the pieces of this billion-piece puzzle that got scattered all around the world because things like happened, like the burning of 750,000 scrolls at the library in Alexandria, Egypt, and also because when you have certain civilizations that conquer another one, they tend to destroy everything, and decimate things, and so things get lost and or destroyed, and you have to reconstitute everything and try to piece things back together, and it takes time and effort and also ingenuity and skill and everything and so on. And also the ancients didn't want the profane people, just kind of average, didn't know what the heck they were doing, to really know about where the Atlantis is located until they got up to a level of sophistication in order to to decode the whole riddle of Atlantis, and that's what Professor Santos did. That's why he was their representative in a sense, and their messenger, and that's why with him passing away, it falls to me, and eventually it'll probably fall to Philipe as well.
And so, if Professor Santos was here today, how do you think he'd feel about the progression so far that you guys have had with taking over his research or furthering his research, I should say?
Absolutely. Anybody interested, also on our website, atlan.org, we have videos of his interviews down in Brazil so people can have a sense of who he was, if anyone's interested. But I'll definitely say he knows it's a long game, right, Michael? We're talking about the secret of humanity here.
Yeah.
And in a very mystical, intuitive way, where it's spread in the faces of everyone, and the cultures all over the world, most all religions, most all races and religions derive from this common ancestor of civilization, or cradle of civilization, right?
Yeah.
As Professor Arysio Santos poses, is the out of Eden theory or hypothesis versus as opposed to the out of Africa common scientific assumption we have today. And that's another thing about science too, Michael, right? It changes.
Yeah.
New assumptions are made, right? And more we have to evolve our paradigms of science in order to better understand reality. And it's necessary we have an open mind towards many of these topics, many of these subjects, and try to see it with a very separated point of view, you know.
Yeah.
Something
To go with that too, Michael, is that Professor Santos was a professional scientist trained in the scientific method and in epistemology. Epistemology is a philosophical science concerned with the framing of theories and their scientific analysis. So he was really doing this from a real professional scientist point of view. And that's why, when answering your question in more detail, I should say, is that we want, scientists to start to come on board and maybe contact us about and take a honest look at this, rather than just look away or hide from it or something like that. And I understand why they did hide from it in the past, because people misled them and they turned them off. And so we want to really get them more involved now than ever before. So if people want to contact us, they can do it through our website, and also other talk show hosts and people that can might want to interview Philipe and I. We're glad to participate on this. I'm doing this full time, and Philipe is starting to maybe do this full time too. And Philipe has been very instrumental in helping things like Professor Santos' audio or videos, because he's translated the subtitles into English, and Philipe speaks Portuguese and Spanish as well as English. And so this is what we're trying to do. I mean, at some point, maybe we can actually override Professor Santos' audio and have that go right into English or something like that. But this is the reason we've also got this universal translator on, because this is about humanity for the whole world, knowing about where the civilization came from, it began, and that civilization and culture began in Indonesia, not in some other spot, and spread out from there all to all these different countries around the world, and not the other way around. And so that's why we're trying to do the work we are, because I mentioned before, this is Professor Santos' gift to the world.
And so, let's talk about Atlantis a little bit. What we might know, or what you might know about it. I don't know a whole lot about it, but what kind of place was it? What was it like? What do we know about how socially how it was?
Good question.
Yeah.
All right. So I believe Frank will add up to what I say here, but there's some things we can say for sure, right, Michael, and some other things we cannot. But what we do know of Atlantis, and there are plenty of things, and mostly the academic or the civilization today would recognize Atlantis through Plato, all right?
Yeah.
He was the one who transcribed, and even then there were secret societies though, and even Plato would participate in a whole bigger plot of hiding the secret of humanity. That's Atlantis, right? And it spread all over the culture of the world. And here's the thing which Arysio proposed, Professor Santos, which is, well, maybe we have to assume, and this is really key into understanding the whole Atlantis perspective, is maybe assuming that the ancients, let's call it that way, or whoever was, and again we're backed up by many different little pieces that all fit together so perfectly. It's really amazing. And Michael, when I started reading the articles here that my grandfather left, and me as I only got access through the last year or so. So I do have a scientific, impartial point of view, or at least I try to. And when I finally had access, even growing up with my grandfather, but only now inheriting the files, the digital files, and which we are organizing, by the way, to make it public. It's just amazing because you really have to start understanding all these different histories and little pieces, and when you start reading like 10 or 15 different articles on different topics, it starts making sense. We're talking about the alignment of the pyramids, the end of the last glaciation period, or the what we call ice age, with which ended on a huge explosion, which is the war that's so much related into the Hindu or the Indians' ancient culture and very rooted. We're talking about the which derived the story behind the Bible or Islam or the Jewish people. We're talking about a common answer, and this is very powerful in a sense.
Yeah.
Right. And there are many things that are pretty clear, and just so people might be getting to the key here. Assume just the fact that a huge civilization, it's just spread into the common culture. Even today, we're talking about almost 12,000 years later, means it was probably pretty huge. Okay. So anyhow, the key is maybe assuming that the ancients come from a more advanced, higher post society than what we believe they are. Okay. Even though we come from a rise, right? We're rising in technology, and we can look back 4,000 years. Yeah. But the proposition here, it's that maybe there was a stop into development. There was a big abrupt ending that happened, which was the end of the Pleistocene, which was the end of the last ice age, which is the wars registered in the Hindu myths and many different religions, all over the world. Michael, we have the Canary Islands, okay, with the tribes there. We have the South Indians, North Americans, okay, the Aborigines people from Australia, right? The Hindu themselves, Chinese. We have Chinese Atlantis, okay, and the list goes on. Of all of them relating to an ancient paradise, a terrestrial paradise, a perfect land, which they all came, from, and how it was. And they are spread out, and they all talk about, they have common points in their religions and their myths. And finally, there's work connecting all of this, and apparently nobody did it yet, but it's just, once you start seeing it and assuming it more, the reality becomes really clear, or at least somewhat clear. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's pretty much it.
You agree with that, Frank?
That's pretty much a lot of it. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle, but I mean, it's just we can talk about one little part every all the time and every day, and there's another part we have to mention. One thing about Atlantis is for everybody out there, it's the soul of the world. It's the soul of the world, and I mean, the civilization all started spreading out from then. They went and migrated back and forth between Africa and where the civilization was invented. The cradle of civilization was in Atlantis, Indonesia, and so it had to migrate back and forth depending on the climatic conditions at the time. But one of the biggest inventions of all time is agriculture. The Atlanteans invented agriculture, and the other one followed with that was animal domestication. So they didn't have to be fixated to the land, and they didn't have to be. They could be fixated to the land. They didn't have to be hunter-gatherers anymore. So it gave them the fixation to the land, so they could develop things like philosophy and religion and all these different types of inventions, such as metallurgy, stone masonry, sculpture, paper, alphabet, medicinal drugs, weaving, and oddly enough, gunpowder. Gunpowder is actually from alchemy out of Atlantis, not out of China. The Chinese picked it up from there. Gunpowder.
Oh, okay. And
Atlantis.
And what about the technology? What type of technology existed in Atlantis? I mean, I've heard everything from ET technology to even off-worldly visitations and such. I mean,
all right.
Yeah.
Professor Santos, Ph.D. nuclear physicist. He died convinced that 12,000 years ago, or actually maybe 11,700 years ago, an atomic bomb, a huge nuclear bomb exploded, defining Earth back then, ending the last ice age, and a huge cataclysm called the Flood in many religions over the place. So think about an atomic bomb capable of ending the world type of deal.
Yeah, let me elaborate with that, Philippe, a second.
Of course.
The Krakatoa volcano went off, but there was a war of Atlantis between the Aryo Semites and the Dravidas. That's the war of Atlantis between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. And what happened is they had this so-called bright idea, which wasn't so bright, to get one up on the other side in this war, to drop a nuclear atom bomb down the Krakatoa volcano, or in or around it. And it went off, and a lot more expected, on a chain reaction, and almost destroyed the whole world. It ended up extincting about 70% of the mammals on Earth. So it caused a big problem where over 20 million people died in a day and a night. That's where we have the All Souls Day, or it's called the Land of the Blessed, which is of the dead. The Land of the Dead was Atlantis, Indonesia. And there wasn't that much more population for the whole Earth. Maybe, I don't know, it could have been maybe 25 million or something at the most. But over 20 million died just then, and the rest had to flee out of the area to those places I mentioned, like India and they went also more westward into European countries, and so Turkey, and eventually over to, let's say, France or Europe, England, whatever it may be. Say Norway, Sweden, Finland, all those countries. They had to scram out of there, but this nuclear war, because it's also to do with the signature too. That's why we know about this, because what happens is that the nuclear or atomic bomb leaves a thing called a signature. And it's not something that we can like fake or something, because it has a signature. It goes back 11,600 years, and so there's parts even in Samaria that show some of these tactical nuclear weapons that have gone off in the past. It only can be done with a nuclear weapon, not some other type of device. And they leave a half-life daughter products, and so that's what was done there. And so that's why he knows, as a nuclear physicist, that an atom bomb was not just detonated in Hiroshima and Nagasaki for the first times, but actually it was done in a time of Atlantis, and the big one was down the Krakatoa volcano.
Is that where that big sheet of glass that I hear about, I think part of Africa and out that way. There's supposed to be a big sheet of glass that they say was caused by what they believe is a nuclear explosion.
Well, in Samaria, there's glass particles there, and also in Arapa, in like India or Pakistan, the borders changed, and Mohenjo-Daro, those have been found glass type of particles and nuclear signatures in those areas. So you got at least 3 areas right there that are really outside of the direct area of Atlantis. It wasn't the first time that Robert Oppenheimer mentioned that the nuclear bomb went off. He said it in statements of some students. It wasn't the first time, because look at in order to invent a nuclear device for the first time, it's really hard because you're starting from square zero, and but they had some information at the time from Atlantis information that they went by on the Manhattan Project, and there's a number of scientists. And by the way, I've got a list of those scientists. I have to dig it up that Robert Oppenheimer is involved in that had this information, and so they were able to develop it much quicker. It's much quicker in a sense than what Hitler did or the Nazis did, which they were after it too at the same time, and they did, and we beat them to it instead of them getting a nuclear device, and so that changes things. But it's a situation that where they had at least some advanced information from the Atlanteans that they were able to make use of.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, guys. We're going to take our last break here tonight, and we'll come back, and we'll have some more time, and we'll finish up. So hang on there with me for a few minutes as we take this break. Folks, I got Frank Joseph Hoff and now Philipe Santos Araujo with me. I'll get that right at some point, folks. You're listening to The Last Frequency. I am Mike Vera, and yeah, it's out there somewhere, and these guys know where it is, and they're telling you tonight where it is, and boy, we just don't get enough time in one show for this. We're going to have to, we still got a little time, but we're going to have these guys back and do this again, because there's so much more I want to know about Atlantis, and well, we're gonna ask some more questions, folks. So Frank Joseph Hoff is my guest. Also with me is Philipe Santos. Say that again for me.
That's a common mispronunciation. Americans have a hard time with J-O. I believe it's Araujo here in Brazil.
Oh, okay. All right. Yep. I definitely have trouble. I am notorious for blowing up last names. So I apologize. Yeah. So what about, I guess, what's it going to take to actually start getting to exploring? I mean, are we able to go get that far down? Are we able to get to it? Yes.
We have some people in Indonesia, some people that are helping us, and researchers there that are into discovering a few things. One of them is geologist Danny Hillman Natawijaya. He's a geologist there that I have a photo of that's done a lot of the excavation, as I mentioned, on Gunung Padang, which is located in West Java, Indonesia, not too far from a city called Cianjur. And him and his team is really dedicated in getting into these caverns that I mentioned, and seeing what might be inside them, like maybe the Hall of Records or something else. We also have another one by a person by Danny Orwanto. He's a person that's an engineer over there, hydraulic type engineer, and he's working on the location of the capital city of Atlantis. And then we also have another contact in Indonesia, and I just give you his first name is Bob, and I'm working with him on some ancient artifacts that we got to get analyzed, where it's not just about 10 or 20 of them, but hundreds, maybe thousands of them. But we need to check, and they got some very unusual properties of their metal. And so I don't know if they're, go back in time enough or not, because I don't know if they can really be carbon dated, but maybe some of the metal can be somehow, scientifically evaluated somehow and see if we can tie it back into the time of Atlanteans. And I don't want to be premature too much on this, so we have to check it out first. So these things are coming about. Now, I wanted to mention our book again, which is Atlantis, the Lost Continent Finally Found by Professor Arysio Santos. That's in short for his name. And the subtitle is The Definitive Localization of Plato or Plato's Lost Civilization. So you might check that out. Our website's at www.atlan.org. It's an ORG website, or under Atlantis Publications, www.atlantispublications.com. And if people are interested, they can contact us, maybe get involved, or maybe turning this information on to researchers and scientists and engineers and technicians and academics that might more be inclined to, really check things out honestly. And we're sorry that they've had problems in the past from other researchers doing the work not properly. But we're trying to get this done properly, as Professor Santos set out all along to do it. Because when science, one thing you try to do is not only just prove something, but you also go out to disprove it. And so that's what science is really all about. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, and so what would this mean to the world? I mean, I'd be excited. I think a lot of people would, but realistically, what would this mean to the world to finally come out and say, yes, Atlantis really did exist, here it is, and here's what it was about?
Well, it might be more of an idea of going back to what they call the Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, and maybe world peace for once, with a lion nice. lay down with a lamb and so on, and vice versa. So, that's really the goal is entering what they call the Satya Yuga, in the Hindu stages of things. And so, we might get that. We also learn about our where we all came from. Where civilization was developed for the first time, where culture expounded from, So, and that's why we actually did have that World Cultural Forum in Bali, Indonesia. I was there, and we gave a presentation regarding that, and a lot of people didn't realize it, probably even though we saw a lot of culture there, that actually emanated from Indonesia, from Atlantis, right there. Yeah, I understand your question, and we want to get this out, so if anybody can help us do that, or people that have means and resources to do that and help further this, all the better. Isn't that right, Philipe?
So yes, it's actually about the new age, right? It's the return of the golden age, as mentioned in all of the Hindu ancient sacred texts. It's the end of the dark age we're in, of ignorance, and it's the return of this golden era, which might leave a lot of people pissed for some reason. But yeah, we need an open mind into going into this next phase of humanity.
We really do. And so what do you think we're going to learn about when it comes down to it, what do you think we're going to learn about ourselves through this? What if we find out that it was more savage civilization than we thought, or is that just not the case?
It's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years,
Ooh,
that's how far back. Because the Toba volcano went off at 75,000 years and destroyed, in a large part, the motherland called Lemuria, Atlantis. It's in basically the same spot where Atlantis proper, the wondrous sun, ended up coming back. They had to rebuild over a period of 63,000 years. Because the first time with Toba volcano was kind of a diaspora. And even the second time with the Krakatoa was a diaspora because of the atomic bomb going off. So, this is really about humanity and how we treat each other. This is what, to answer your question, is that, maybe we need to work on treating each other a whole lot better. And so and watch out what we're doing with tactical nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons, or full-blown nuclear weapons, because we can end up destroying each other and the whole civilization and perishing everybody on Earth, including all the animals too. So,
yeah, you know what, Frank, and I think that's a big lesson that we could learn if we could learn more about Atlantis and get the word out there. We don't want to repeat history, and it seems like we're going down that same path that the Atlanteans did.
That's it. And so Professor Santos, that's part of his message too, his gift to the world, is understanding this, that we're going to have to work really hard and be passionate about the way we treat people. We can't just take it, very lightly. We got to take it much more serious and more harmoniously, and stop a lot of this nuclear type of rattle and threatening and all this kind of thing, and building up of too many nuclear weapons and so on. But what really worries me also is the tactical nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
that's where you see the part in Samaria with the glass and everything. But according to Professor Santos, because he was a nuclear physicist and engineer, is that you can't have that kind of nuclear signature without an atom bomb going off. So they exploded before the one in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those are just like the second, third, fourth, whatever it is. They're not the first ones going off.
It seems that history repeats itself. I'm surprised we haven't blown ourselves up yet. And there's just enough crazies in the world where eventually something bad's going to happen. I mean, we've already had meltdowns of nuclear facilities and things like that, and that's bad enough. And, of course, what happened in Japan was horrible. But, I mean, it'd be much worse than that today. Yeah, that's nothing compared to what it will be like if, something. I actually read an article somewhere where I don't know if there was some country was talking about doing something like that, dropping a nuke down a volcano. I forget now. This was months ago I read about it, and I thought, first thing I thought about was you in Atlantis, and I thought, oh boy, here we go. But
yeah, because it went off more than expected. It wasn't such a bright idea because it literally destroyed the people that were actually probably put it in there. Yeah. Because the reaction was a lot more. Hey, by the way, just to make this in perspective, I'm going to back up to something. Christopher Columbus supposedly is trying to discover America. He ran into the Americas. He was looking for the East Indies rather, and he ran into the Americas because he didn't take the dialogues of Plato seriously, the Timaeus and Critias dialogues, and so he ran into this continent here, North and South America, and then he noticed that when they came into the area of basically the Caribbean, they see the Native Americans, so they called them Indians, but they knew within a couple of months that they didn't reach the East Indies or India or anything like that, that they reached Americas, and the name stuck. It's a misappropriate name. That's why we call our Native Americans Indians here. The appropriate name goes to people over in India or Indonesia, and Indonesia means islands or islands of India. That's what it means, Indonesia. Islands of India or islands close to India. And so this whole thing, when you live when you're in school, you learned about Christopher Columbus looking for the East Indies, but they never explained to you after he found the Americas where we have the idea of finding the East Indies for the kings and queens of Europe because of the riches of Atlantis. If you probably asked that question, they probably told you to sit down and shut up because they didn't know or they didn't want to answer you.
Yeah, it's like with a lot of things nowadays. I mean, you erase the history, and Atlantis is part of that history that seems to have been erased, and we can't learn from it. And I mean, we need to learn from it, especially Atlantis, the way it went out. We don't want to go the same way. And I'm guessing we've got a lot more crazies in the world today than they had then. They were, what'd you say, 20 million, maybe 25, and now we're talking billions of people on the planet today. So our chances are greater of destroying ourselves.
Well, if you learn about Atlantis, and I think Philipe will agree, it'll help us find ourselves. It'll help us find ourselves. That's what we need to do, is find ourselves. So we lost ourselves. We lost our history and our where we developed from out of Atlantis, Indonesia, and we think because we're Europeans or something like that, Atlantis has got to be in and around Europe or something of that nature. It's just short-sighted thinking, not to think that it couldn't be another side of the world. By the way, the Eden that you learn about in the Bible, or Eden, is the Garden of Eden of Lemuria, Atlantis. That's where the Garden of Eden is actually located. If you look in the Bibles or text, it always tells about Eden being located in the east.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's where the Garden of Eden actually came from. Is from the Garden of Lemuria, Atlantis, the motherland of civilization.
And I'll say this, folks, again, if that can be destroyed, imagine, we're not far behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Michael, think about an advanced society. Okay, very, very advanced. We're talking about looking into the languages and the historical. For instance, they throughout their myths, they would always imply 3 different levels of meanings. It was a very allegorical language, right? And that's how actually Professor Santos was able to decipher, once he finally saw the screaming truth on the myths of all over society. Yeah. What actually he saw was that it came from a very more advanced language, or in the way of poetry, and how they would express their deep meanings. So we current modern society like looking back into our history and thinking it's just fable stories, okay, about some made up explanation of society, and it actually might come from a very more advanced language that we are not even able to decipher yet.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about hundreds of thousands of years of development, and maybe very more subtle than what we are today, and something maybe we cannot comprehend. And if these kind of civilizations still got savage by the bad things, right, the dark egoistical nature of human beings, and they destroy themselves, I mean, maybe we're not far from destroying ourselves, and many times over the history of humanity, there's many ends of the world that came up, ending civilization as people knew them. And, Atlantis is just not the last one, and there's actually a Lemuria, and then it would, and even more, wise ancient civilizations that disappeared or destroyed themselves, right? So we're really in this small line of nothing and very humbleness, so we need to, why make war? Why spend so much on war when we could all be living happily, right? So
I know, that's what I say. Just imagine if we had the right frame of mind worldwide and we put all our resources into exploring our oceans more, exploring other planets more. I mean, just think where we could be if we wouldn't put so much into just controlling and destroying each other. It's amazing. And so, hopefully we last long enough to learn more about Atlantis. And one thing I worry about is the greed that is within governments. And say the exploration starts of Atlantis, and they find technology. Maybe they already have. People often indicate, well, this is alien technology and such. Maybe some of this and a lot of this is Atlantis technology. Maybe it's from our own technology from the past, and we're fooled into thinking it's got to be some superficial stuff from somewhere else. And anyways, in short, I really worry about this technology getting in the wrong hands and never getting to the people. And I hope that don't happen. So
we are the profanes. We can only hope, right? So,
yeah.
Well, maybe Michael, we can get to the Hall of Records. There might be all sorts of technological advancements in that information, if there is such a thing, and we can find it maybe in the pyramids in Egypt, or maybe in the Gunung Padang Pyramid Mountain, which might be a lot more preserved than in Egypt or other places it could be possibly at. So
Yeah, we could either go to heaven or to hell. You know,
That's
there's
it.
ways we can.
Yeah,
so.
and nothing will ignite hell like a nuclear weapon inside of a volcano. That had to have been hell right here on Earth. So, but guys, I want to give you both an opportunity to get on anything else that you'd like in this last few minutes that we have. So, Frank, I'll start with you. And then we'll have to do this again. I got to get the video right and stuff, and we'll get on camera as well. But so anything else you want to throw out there that we need to know? What's coming up next in your research, by the way? Where is this going to go? What's the next step?
Well, first of all, the word abyss comes from going down inside the Krakatoa volcano. So if you heard that word abyss, that's what it relates to. There's other words that relate to it too. And by the way, there's many names for Atlantis, and one's even El Dorado. You might have heard of.
Yeah.
Another one's Lanka, but not like Sri Lanka. Lanka has associated with Sumatra, and there's just a whole lot of other words that go along with that too. Mente is another one, and Delum, and these are all in different languages like Egyptian and so on. So with that. We hope to have some type of conference in different parts of the world. In Indonesia, Atlantis, Indonesia is one, but we could have them here in the United States. So if people are looking to put on a conference or might be interested in having us or inviting us to, speak about Atlantis, Philipe and I would be glad to attend one of these conferences and lay this out more visually too, because we have PowerPoint presentations and so on about this. So, we get to the bottom of it if everybody really wants to do it, or else other radio talk shows that might be out there. Besides, I'm really glad to maybe coming back on your show in the future to lay this out, or maybe on it with a video part. But our website, again, is at www.atlan.org, or it's easier for people, www.Atlantis Publications, that's plural on the S on the publications.com, and they can also contact us through that if they need to, or maybe direct people to contact us that might be put on a conference, seminar, a symposium, or on radio, TV, whatever types of things, so we can get the word out. Again, we're doing this for humanity. This is Professor Santos' gift to the world, and maybe overall might be world peace might be involved in this, and going back to the golden age, the Satya Yuga. Go ahead, Philipe.
Right. Yes, again, thank you. Great show. Thank you for the audience and the invitation.
Okay.
Definitely we need to talk more about these subjects, for good or for worse. This is what science is about. It's about discussing ideas in a civilized manner. And yes, definitely there's a lot more work to be done. And we're happy to discuss furthermore and develop this work, and every help is appreciated. And again, anybody can go on the website, contact either me or Frank, and discuss more of these ideas and of the works. And if you're interested in reading more and some of Professor Santos' papers, get.
Sounds good. Listen, guys, thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate it. Flew by too, as it usually does. I'll definitely be passing this around, and hopefully be getting the interest of many others, and look forward to hearing you on many more shows. And I'm glad to catch up with you, Frank. It's been a little while.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate you listening to us and having us on, and also all your listeners from locally and around the country and around the world, for that matter.
All right. Thank you. You guys have a great night. And until next time, stay safe and keep up the great research.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Good night. All right, folks. There they go. Atlantis, the lost continent, finally found. And, I'm convinced. Why not? Why not? Now I'd like to see the exploration start, that Hall of Records that Frank talks about. Boy, would I love to get into that. Or, who knows? Watch what you wish for, too. You never know what we might find out about ourselves. It could be a lot. I worry about the greedy finding this stuff and then hiding it from the rest of us, and I hope that should never happen. And hopefully with guys like Frank and Philipe on the ball here, maybe that won't happen. So, but yeah, the time has flown by tonight, folks, and I'm just gonna close up with you all here. Whew, yeah, Atlantis. A nuclear bomb in the volcano. That sounds so familiar because just recently I had read where, I don't know what it was, if one country was talking about doing it to another country, and I'm thinking, don't do that. This is why we've got to learn from our history. This is why you can't erase the history. You erase the history, and it's going to repeat. All right, and it seems like it is. What if we're on this flip? This loop? It's boom, we blow up. We got to start over. What if that's the case? I hope not. So, we got to learn. We got to keep the statues up. We got to talk about the history, whether it's no matter how hard it is. Stop pampering the crybabies. For real, we do. Man, oh man, I'm seeing bad stuff, folks. I'm seeing bad stuff. I'm in a position where I see thousands of people a week. I really do. I talk. I'm not kidding you. I talk with thousands of people a week. And, man, people have been brainwashed. I'm starting to wonder if maybe I'm Michael Vera. This has been a broadcast of The Last Frequency on the VARA network. Keep your eyes posted to the sky because, you never know what you might see. And keep your ears posted to this broadcast. You never know what you might learn. Good night, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of The Last Frequency.